All right, fam, you're going to want to keep an eye on this. There's some pretty cryptic reporting going on. I don't know if you were paying a whole lot of attention yesterday, but at the beginning of the day, there was this report from Grant Liffman. He's part of the NBA or the NBC on NBA team, and he reported that there are no active trade conversations happening between the Warriors and the Mavericks involving Anthony Davis. Cool story, bro. I don't know. Yeah, I think we moved on from that a while ago. As you've heard me say 1,000 times, I don't want to trade AD to the Warriors unless a third team is involved, because that would mean that we have to take on Draymond Green. No, thank you. But then shortly thereafter, there's more of the Shams Charania. Dallas Mavericks are interested in Jonathan Kuminga, and Kuminga wants to play for the Mavericks. Like we're back to what we were talking about a couple weeks ago, or maybe just last week. The I think you're cute phase. The Mavericks still have not asked Kuminga to the prom, even though they think he's cute. But whatever. I'm seriously reading between the lines here, because I'm like, yeah, at surface level, you're probably right, Grant. There's probably no ongoing conversations involving Anthony Davis. Okay, but what does that mean? What does that mean? Because there's still interest between Kuminga, and here we are 2 weeks before the trade deadline, and you can see the question at the bottom. The question of the day is, will Daniel Gafford be the first Mav to be traded? I think so. We're going to talk about why that is today, and we've got a game tonight against the Golden State Warriors. Interesting timing for all of this. Yeah, we're going to talk some, you heard it here first today. I am your host, Ethan, the advisor Clayton. This is Your Mavs, a Dallas Mavericks podcast where all are welcome. Y'all better behave. Lots to talk about. Let's dive in. I guess we'll start with the game that's happening tonight. I was really conflicted as I was starting to look at who's playing for the Warriors. I saw that Daniel Gafford is questionable in tonight's game, so that I think that means he's likely to return. Because if you're that far in advance labeled as questionable, there is a likelihood that you're going to play. If you're doubtful, then that story tells itself. I really struggled to know how to prognosticate here. I don't know if the Mavericks are going to win or lose this game. I did wind up landing in one spot. I'll go ahead and tell you what I think the score is going to be. I do think that we're going to lose 118-111. But even as I say that out loud, I'm starting to question, because every pundit that I listen to about the NBA is talking about how bad of a team the Warriors are without Jimmy Butler. I had forgotten, I had forgotten how bad they were last year before the trade deadline. And they're like, you know what? We need to make a big splash trade. Then since Jimmy Butler has been traded for the Warriors, and since he has worn a Warriors jersey, they have been 46-22. And listening to the Zach Lowe show last night, there's also an interesting stat that whenever Steph is not on the court, but Jimmy Butler is, they still have a +9 net rating. So there's a lot of this Warriors success has depended on Jimmy Butler. I didn't understand or fully realize just how deep that connection was. So now, I'm already questioning whether or not my prediction is going to come true, that we're going to lose 118-111. But just because Jimmy Butler's not playing doesn't mean that Steph Curry isn't going to light us up. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have a close competitive game that is decided by a Steph Curry three-pointer from the logo. Those are just the kind of things I see happening. I was actually, if you'll remember, going into the Christmas Day game against the Warriors, was actually really confident that we were going to win that one, and then we got it handed to us on national television. So I'm kind of taking a quick course correction here and saying that we're going to lose this game. But I'm not confident as I say that at all. We have very little sample size for what the Warriors are going to look like moving forward. They did lose the other night, but they didn't look too terrible. You've heard me say this quite a bit. There's nothing I love more than the Dallas Mavericks basketball, right? Seriously, I like all of our players. I think we're a talented roster, but for some reason it doesn't make sense. We are not really a good team. And I said it the other day that I think a lot of this hot offensive stretch that we're on right now, where we're just shooting the leather off the ball, I think it's a little bit fake. And I think we're going to see that tonight. Like as we are in Golden State, like, that's a pretty rowdy crowd to be traveling to. There will be some, emotional ties there, obviously, with Klay Thompson spending the majority of his career there. There's been smoke recently about him potentially ending his career as a Golden State Warrior. So there's going to be some interesting vibes tonight at the Chase Center. Again, I think we'll lose. I think Steph Curry will own this game. But as far as you heard it here first. The name of the day is Daniel Gafford, right? I told you that he is questionable to return. I told you that I think he's the first Mav that's going to be traded by the deadline. I told you at the beginning of this episode that, there's all the back and forth reporting about whether or not the Warriors and Mavs are talking 80 trades. I think it's going to be Daniel Gafford that's involved in that trade. We're going to talk more about trade stuff here in a moment. But because of the nature of all this smoke, I'm going to say that this is a Daniel Gafford showcase game. Okay, get ready for it. We're going to see 15 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 blocks from our guy, from the landlord. And I've already said that I thought a game was going to be his last game as a Maverick. But, let's say he does play tonight and he does go off and have that double-double with 5 blocks. Yeah, that's a pretty nice showcase game because I listen to a lot of NBA content. I read a lot from the Steinline. I'm trying to stay tapped into what's going on across the league. And kind of the vibe that I've been hearing lately is that there are still a lot of teams interested in Daniel Gafford, but his value is taking a little bit of a hit because he has not been super strong this season, right? And we've seen very few games. He hasn't been able to put together a good stretch of games without re-injuring his ankle. When he has played, there's been flashes here and there of him being impactful on both sides of the ball. But now I'm a little bit concerned that we wouldn't even be able to get a first round draft pick in a trade involving Daniel Gafford. So I think, he knows that. We know that. We all, everybody's kind of watching this situation here. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a good showcase game for him. Again, 15 points, 10 rebounds, 5 blocks. Moving on. I'm not going to throw a specific stat line out there for Cooper Flagg, but for virtually every game when I do You Heard It Here First, I'm going to talk about something related to the main event. Tonight, what I think is going to happen, and it might even break the internet, is that he is going to posterize Draymond Green. I suspect to see Draymond covering him for maybe not all the game, but there's going to be some stretches where they're on each other on the floor. I believe. I could be wrong about that. But whether or not Draymond is covering him one-on-one, I think it's going to come a time that Coop drives aggressively to the hoop. He decides, hey, I'm about to end somebody's life, and that person winds up being Draymond Green. I cannot wait to see that poster happen. And my final, you heard it here first, that very poster dunk over Draymond Green is going to lead to a small altercation. Imagine that. Draymond Green is going to get a technical foul because of how upset he is over the poster that he just received, or the poster that he's now on. Okay. Those are the kinds of things I see happening tonight. I don't think this is going to be a very exciting game. I could be wrong. I will be so happy to jump on tomorrow morning's pod and tell you that I was wrong about whether or not the Mavericks could beat even this version of the Warriors. Guys, we got to tank. And, even if we don't lose this game, I told you yesterday, the upcoming stretch of games, it's not impossible. We could have a 500 record or whatever in that stretch, but it's going to be tough. And the Mavericks, they're going to be exposed whether or not this stretch that we've been on is fake. So anyway, that's all I got for the You Heard It First. Let's move on. And since we're totally camped out only talking about Daniel Gafford today, let's go back to the trade stuff, the trade smoke. Again, we are exactly 2 weeks away from the trade deadline. And so far, the only thing that's happened across the NBA trade-wise has been Trae Young to the Washington Wizards. We're a week or so, maybe 2 weeks removed from that trade. It's still so wild to me, the landscape that we find ourselves in with kind of the new collective bargaining agreement and all the aprons and how it makes trading more difficult. And now players that have had all-star talent, it's just a really, really weird, we'll figure out what this is in the future kind of thing. And so, yeah, I do think Daniel Gafford is going to be the first Maverick to be traded, and I do think it's going to happen with the Warriors. Even though I said on the pod yesterday that we were probably out of the Kuminga sweepstakes, I'm my bad. I was probably wrong. I've been wrong on the show before. I'll be wrong again. But what would it take? I think we've talked about like kind of the salary matching situation. If we sent Gafford and Klay Thompson, that's sending out $34 million. And if we bring in Jonathan Kuminga, this season's salary is about $22 million. And because both of these teams are just under the second apron threshold, that trade framework would not work. So we need to find another player or another team to help us take care of that $12 million. Because ultimately it would need to be the Warriors that are sending out another $12 million of salary. So if that type of deal got done, like Gafford and Klay Thompson plus something else goes to Golden State, what I'm going to ask listeners today, if you look at that trade package, do you think that is a win now move that keeps Steph Curry happy? I truly don't know how I feel about that. I think they've been looking for a starting level center, right? Daniel Gafford certainly can be that for them, right? The Al Horford experiment hasn't worked super well, so they're putting a lot of they're relying a lot on Quentin Post and other guys that just really aren't those guys yet. So yeah, Gafford certainly could be that person for them pretty well day one, as long as his ankle stuff gets figured out along the way. That one, I'm just going to say maybe he needs to change the scenery, a new medical staff to look at it. Be like, you know what? Let's do this, and then you're going to be just fine. I don't have a lot of faith in what I've seen from the medical staff this season either for the Mavericks. But and then of course Klay, hometown hero, very much a crowd favorite. Won few championships with them. One of the all-time leading three-point shooters. Of course, they're going to be excited to have him back in Golden State if that's what winds up happening. I don't know if you're going to classify that as a win now move, but goodness gracious, Klay Thompson sure is on fire these days. So, I kind of, as I've thought about, the prospect of trading Klay Thompson, I've really only been thinking through the lens of a title contender, right? Because if you're not going to go compete for a championship, you might as well stay in Dallas and be the veteran presence and continue being our spark plug off the bench. But I don't think the Warriors are a title contender, especially now that Jimmy Butler's out for the season. So I don't know what is really going through the Golden State Warriors front office mind. I mean, you probably heard the bars that Mike Dunleavy dropped about Kuminga. Like, if you're going to make a demand, then there's got to be a demand. We at least know their thought process about Kuminga right now. I don't know if that's changing at all now that Butler's not going to play. Like, there's a lot of question marks coming out of San Francisco and what they're going to do moving forward. But clearly, there's not any AD conversations. Clearly, there is mutual interest between Kuminga and the Mavericks. Clearly, the Warriors are not a win-now team, so I don't know how aggressive they're going to be at the trade deadline. But that's kind of how all of this could work together. Again, I was trying to read between the lines whenever I was looking at those separate reports about no more ongoing conversations between Golden State related to AD and then the Jonathan Kuminga stuff. So this is just such an interesting trade deadline. I probably never paid this close attention before because I've never been recording a show for my Mavs fam. But if it's like this every year, what a wild time. What a wild time. I don't know if it was like this before the current CBA. But anyway, let's say we do get that trade done and Kuminga is a Dallas Maverick, right? Like, I'm going to ask for a first round draft pick or two. So yeah, don't forget about that. Like, that is very much part of this equation. But for Kuminga, I did a little bit of digging on why I feel like this is such a low risk move. And I think you're going to agree with me. What I didn't realize is that he has a team option on his contract next season. And if that option is exercised, his contract is $24.3 million. And basically we would play him through the rest of the season. And then we would only have until June 29th to decide whether or not we were going to pick up that player, pick up that player option. If we do, but we don't extend his contract next season, then he just becomes a unrestricted free agent in the summer of 2027. So that's one scenario there. Feels pretty low risk. Again, we trade for him, play out the rest of the season. If it's a good fit, okay, we opt in, he plays another season. That's not that expensive of a contract, $24.3 million. That's still going to be tradable next season too. Then he ultimately becomes an unrestricted free agent. However, if we trade for him and it's not a good fit, we don't like the look on the basketball court, then in the summer, we can decline the player option. So all of a sudden, we would have the cap flexibility. We would have the pick or two that came along with him in that trade. And, as icing on the cake, the Sacramento Kings could go get their guy. Like, man, if you think there's been flirting between the Mavs and Jonathan Kuminga, goodness gracious, the Kings have been talking and, looking his way for months, maybe even years now. I don't know how a trade hasn't been figured out between those two teams, but, again, I'm here to talk about the Mavericks, not the Kings. But it's just a really interesting low risk move, if you ask me, because again, we're not committing to him long term, and if we opt in for next season, and again we like what we're seeing from him, we can go ahead and extend his contract and then commit to him long term, and he'll only be 24 at that time. I think that's pretty solid. But the last thing I wanted to talk about today, I'm sorry, my brain is not working super well today. I'm trying to put together coherent thoughts and talking points for you. I'm going to wrap it up with this next one. Going back to Anthony Davis, there's nothing happening with Golden State. You've heard me say that like 12 times on this show. Toronto is a different story, right? It was reported by Tim McMahon that the trades involving Anthony Davis and Toronto are still very much open-ended. So, hey, let's not totally give up hope on AD being moved before the trade deadline just yet. But he did add, Tim McMahon did add that the Mavs would likely to add a third team, because again, one of their ultimate goals is to shed salary and regain flexibility with their cap situation. So if we, the discussed trade package that would involve either RJ Barrett or quickly with Jakob Poeltl, right, with a really bad contract, then that doesn't really give us any financial flexibility whatsoever, and that's one of our main goals. So adding that third team, we would really have to figure out what to do with, maybe $25 million of salary, because if they were trying to move all three of those players, Barrett, Quickly, and Poeltl, that's where a third team could come in and, they send us a low-level guy, a low-level rotational guy, and then Toronto sends out the Quickly contract to that third team, then I think it could work. But, man, again, the Jakob Poeltl contract is really, really bad. I don't know if it's as bad as everybody says it is. I mean, there would only be one more year left for, I think, about $20 million on this contract. The problem is he doesn't stay super healthy. Believe it or not, though, he is younger than Anthony Davis and he can shoot threes. I hope he can figure out his whole back situation and, put together a good stretch of games. Maybe not for our sake, but for his sake. But it is interesting to see that there are still some open-ended talks involving Anthony Davis at all, which, by the way, we haven't heard anything from Atlanta in a while. Like, what are they doing? Like, they just continue losing games. Like, are they not going to do something about that? So, guys, again, 2 weeks. Maybe as soon as I'm done recording, like, we'll start to get some actual news, like some moves that are being made. But yeah, listening to Mark Stein talk on the DLLS Mavericks podcast yesterday, the way he put it is like a lot of times teams wait till the literal buzzer of the deadline, and he thinks it's going to be another one of those types of deadlines where, we get all the way up till February 4th, nothing's happened, and then all of a sudden things start clicking. So that's kind of where I have my expectations set, but I do think Daniel Gafford will be the first Maverick to be traded. think tonight's going to be a fun showcase game for him. Nice double-double with 5 blocks. You heard it here first. But fam, that is all I have for you this morning. I will jump back in the studio tomorrow. But let me know if you agree or disagree about Daniel Gafford being the first to be moved. Let me know if you agree that Kuminga is a low-risk trade. Really, anything else that we talked about today, let's keep the conversation going in the comment section. But before you leave, make sure you hit like, subscribe, all that jazz. I enjoy doing this with you guys. Keep on keeping on. Be good.